I'm going to show you how to make this silk ribbon embroidery rudbeckia flower group. I have some 7mm pure silk embroidery ribbon with a knot in one end and a chenille needle on the other, and I'm just deciding where the middle of my flower is going to be. This is a piece of crazy patchwork I'm working on. I'm making life difficult for myself because I'm coming through several layers of fabric here. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a twisted ribbon stitch. So I think I'm going to twist it under like that. I'm passing the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, and I'm just going to leave it kind of flicked up and twisted there for my first petal. I'm going to come up through the centre of the flower again, and I'm working around in an imaginary little circle here with these petals. I'm just straightening out the ribbon with my needle, and I'm going to do another twisted ribbon stitch. Oh, I've accidentally pulled that one through. I'll sort that out in a minute. So this one I'm going to now turn so that it's a reverse ribbon stitch. So you just need to turn the petal over. I've pulled that one back through there now. So you can just pull these about until they look exactly how you want them to look. So I'm coming up for my third flower petal now. And again, I'm twisting the ribbon, passing the ribbon back down through the centre of itself. I'm going to leave that one twisted. Once again, twisting the ribbon and passing the ribbon back down through the centre of itself. So you see I'm working around an imaginary circle here, leaving a little circle in the centre of these petals. So I'm doing another twisted stitch here. So when you're working a ribbon stitch, you need to make sure that you don't pull it too hard or too fast, or the nice curled over ends of your petal will pop through the fabric. You want to leave those nice curls on the top. So this is just a straightforward ribbon stitch I'm doing here. So passing the needle back down through, I've changed my mind. Twisted ribbon stitch. And then just turn it to make a reverse ribbon stitch. So you can just pull those about until they look how you want them to. If you want to make these crazy patchwork hexagons, there is a tutorial on my YouTube channel and also on my website. How to make a quilt as you go crazy patchwork hexagon is what you're looking for. So you can make all these up, embroider your beautiful flowers on, and then sew them all together into a quilt at the end. So I'm just turning that twisted stitch now to reverse it. You can use a little pair of tweezers if it makes life easier for you. So doing another twisted ribbon stitch here. And then just turning that into a reverse so that the ribbon curls up nicely. So only a couple more petals on this one now. I'm going to use a pair of hair straighteners just to flatten out the ribbon again. Get rid of all the creases in it. So just making the ribbon go in the direction I want to now. I'm going to just do a twisted ribbon stitch. Like so. So I've got some more ribbon now, fresh piece. One more twisted ribbon stitch. And my final stitch here, so passing the ribbon back through the centre itself and pulling very gently to form a point, and then turning it to make a reverse ribbon stitch. So now I've got my petals, I'm just going to use a couple of permanent marker pens. These are Pro markers from Letraset. They're permanent, they blend beautifully together so long as they're wet. So I'm just putting on to a couple of petals some light orange and then coming in towards the centre with a darker orange and just allowing the inks to bleed into the fabric and blend into each other. So the silk will actually do all the work for you here. You don't need to do anything, just touch your pen to the ribbon. It won't bleed out into the backing fabric or anything, they're quite well behaved. So just allow the colours to blend together on their own. If you don't have permanent marker pens, you can also use silk dye. It's a cheaper option, you only need to buy the primary colours and then you can mix any colour you need and you can just apply it with a brush. And doing things in white and then colouring afterwards always means that you get a more realistic look because you're able to actually paint the flower and the colours onto the petals as they would be in nature. If you use a flat coloured ribbon, you'll get a flat coloured result. Nobody wants that. We need to put a centre into this flower. I've got some 2mm white silk embroidery ribbon and I'm just doing around the edge 2 wind French knots. So if you haven't done a French knot before, you bring the needle up through the fabric, you wind the ribbon around it twice and then pass it down back through the fabric again. And that will form a little knot or bead like thing on the surface of your fabric. So, as I said, I've made life very difficult for myself here because I've got several layers of fabric on a seam here and I'm sewing through some lace as well. But it's all perfectly possible, and the ribbons from craftyattic are very robust. You don't need to worry about them breaking up or disintegrating on you. So I've got another couple of pens here, 2 different colours of brown to just colour the centre of this flower where I've put all these little French knots. So I did 2 wind French knots around the edge of the centre and I did 3 wind French knots in the middle to give a kind of dome effect. So you need to be careful you're not touching the pen anyway you don't wish to touch it. I've now got some tiny black seed beads and I'm just going to use a normal black polyester thread just to sew a couple of these seed beads in amongst the French knots, just to give it a little bit of a shine and a depth. So there you go, that's our first flower head finished. So now I'm going to form my second rudbeckia head. This one's a slightly older flower head. The petals tend to bend right back on the rudbeckia when they get over a certain age. So this is my first stitch now. I've done a twisted ribbon stitch and I'm just turning that to make a reverse ribbon stitch. I'm going to do another one pointing to the left. I'm going to treat this one in exactly the same way. So I'm going to twist the ribbon, pass the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, allowing the ends to curl into a slight point, and then just turn the ribbon so that it's a reverse stitch. So I'm going to do one coming down in the centre of these 2 now. And again, twisting the ribbon, passing the ribbon back down through the centre of itself, and then twisting it to reverse it. So I'm going to continue now putting a few more petals onto this second flower head. You can pull the ribbon about so that it's pointing in the right direction for you and behaving as you wish. This one here I'm going to turn now. Sometimes if you're trying to turn a stitch and it doesn't want to go, if you just roll the the ribbon on the reverse of the fabric in the right direction. That will help you along. So once again, just using the straighteners here to straighten out the ribbon so that I can continue using it. So twisted the ribbon again here. I'm going to do another reverse ribbon stitch. This one's putting up a bit of a fight. Get the tweezers onto it, give it a tug. So the final petal to the right now. If you need to use a pair of pliers to tug the ribbon through the fabric, you can. You can only do this with 100% pure silk ribbon. If you try and use any other sort of ribbon, you'll find that it won't fold small enough to come through your fabric. So you must use pure silk ribbon. So this side, I'm just going to leave the ribbon folded in half before I do a ribbon stitch to give the impression that we're looking at that petal side on. So there we go. I'm just going to use the same two orange pens that I had before to colour these petals in exactly the same way as I did last time. So just doing 2 or 3 of them, using the light colour on the end of the petals and the darker colour towards the centre of the flower. And just allow the ribbon and the ink to do all the work for you. So there we are, there's our second flower head nearly made. We're just going to again use the 2mm pure silk ribbon to do some French knots to form the centre of this flower, in exactly the same way as we did last time. These are all 3-wind French knots, however, and we're just going to arrange them in a little dome shape because the centre of rudbeckia are quite actually raised and pronounced cone shape. So we're going to work on building that up with these little French knots. If you want to practice these flowers onto an open weave fabric, you'll have a much easier time with it. I'm just doing it on this because it happens to be a project I'm working on and because it demonstrates that you can really do this onto anything. You just have to tug sufficiently hard to get the silk to come through your fabrics. So these hexagons I'm working on will all stitch together to form a quilt in the end. These are little quilt as you go pieces. And there's lots of different ones shown on my website and on my YouTube channel. So just doing more and more French knots to build up the centre of this flower. So now I'm just going to colour the centre of this flower in exactly the same way as I did the centre of the other one. So I've got the same 2 brown marker pens and I'm just touching the top of the silk knots with the marker pen and allowing the ribbon to take the dye from the pen. Always use 2 colours when I'm colouring things because you'll get a much deeper, richer result that way. I've got some tiny little seed beads again. I'm just going to sew a few around in between the French knots of this central flower piece in exactly the same way as I did with the other one, just to add a little bit of depth and sparkle and interest to the finished flower. You don't have to do this stage, you could miss it out. So they're nearly finished with those little black seed beads now. So now I'm going to work on a tiny bud. I've got some 4mm white silk ribbon here and I'm just going to do a straightforward slash stitch, I think, in the middle. and then I'm going to do a ribbon stitch, a reverse ribbon stitch. I've changed my mind. So twist the ribbon and then turn it so that you get a reversed ribbon stitch, so the ribbon curls over nicely and disappears into the fabric in a nice point. So I'm going to do another reverse ribbon stitch there. I'm just now forming up the little tight bunch of petals that you would find in a bud. So they're all reverse ribbon stitch. They're quite tiny, so I'm having to use a little pair of tweezers to turn them. Okay, that's probably enough petals. So now I'm going to do some leafy bits, so the bud casings. So that's just a straightforward ribbon stitch. So having the ribbon flat, and just passing the ribbon back down through the centre itself and allowing the ends to curl over into a little point. So I'm going to do a few of those, just around in a little fan shape. So the ribbons I'm using here are all available from craftyattic.com. We do bundles of all the different sizes you're going to need to do very basic projects. Get yourself started, and we do larger bundles for people who are well into the craft and are getting through a fair amount of ribbon. So I'm now going to colour the central bud petals with the same pens again, using exactly the same technique. And I'm just going to then colour the bud casings with 2 shades of green. So I've got the lighter shade in the centre of the flower and the darker shade towards the end of the little leaves there. Obviously making sure that I'm not touching anything I don't want to be touching with this green pen. I'm now going to do a couple more stitches up over the orange petals, and these will be coloured green in a moment. And this is just showing our bud casing about to pop open. So here I've done a twisted ribbon stitch, and I'm now just going to turn it so that it looks like we're looking at the back of the leaf rather than the front of it. I'm going to do another one, twisted ribbon into the centre of the bud. And then turn it. I want to lift it up a bit as well to allow those petals underneath to bounce rather than be squashed against the fabric. And one more of these reverse ribbon stitches to the right, and that will be our little opening bud finished. So just twist that one. And then just very carefully colour with the green pen. So again, light on the bottom, dark towards the ends of these little leafy bits. There we are. So now it only remains to do some stalks. I've got some 13mm white silk ribbon here. We've used all of the sizes available in this project. So I'm just coming up at the centre of that bud, and I'm going to now twist the ribbon until it's formed a tight little cylinder that looks like a stem. And I'm going to feed it underneath these petals because I want it to be behind this flower head. So just very gently ease it through. and then just stitch it down through the fabric where you want it to be. I'm going to have to tug this quite hard. Not only is it 13mm, I've got several layers of fabric and it's twisted as well, so give it a good hard tug. You might need to pull it backwards and forwards a few times, but it will go through there. So I'm now going to couch this down using a pure cotton thread. When you're working in white and then colouring afterwards, you must make sure that you use a natural fibre when you're couching. Polyester and other man-made fibres don't take up dye very well, so if you use one of those and then you colour afterwards, you'll end up with little white stripes where the two fabrics have taken up the dye in different ways. So you want to use a natural fibre, so either a cotton or a silk to do your couching. So I've just brought the next stem up, and there's a couple of threads hitchhiking there. I'll just sneak them off. So just bring that down and twist it in exactly the same way as you did the last one, and again stitch it down back through the fabric. And we're going to do the same for the third flower head as well. So now we're doing just the final bit of couching to get all these little stems fixed down firmly to the fabric. So you don't need to put in too many stitches, about one every 5 or 7mm, something like that. So now finally I'm just going to colour these stems. Again, I'm using 2 colours of green. So just touching the silk ribbon only, nothing else. You don't need to be touching the backing fabric or anything. And just allow the silk to take the dye up and spread it. So they're being quite careful around those petals. Now I'm just going to use the darker colour just to touch in places to give a nice deep result. So come on over to the website, get yourself a starter bundle and have a go at this fantastic hobby. It's really quick and looks fantastic when you've finished. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it.